David Bowie is the second studio album by English musician David Bowie, released under that title by Philips in the UK, and by Mercury in the US as Man of Words Man of Music. It was later re-released by RCA as Space Oddity but reverted to the original, eponymous, title for a 2009 reissue. Regarding its mix of folk, balladry and prog rock, NME editors Roy Carr and Charles Shaar Murray have said, some of it belonged in 67 and some of it in 72, but in 1969 it all seemed vastly incongruous. Basically, David Bowie can be viewed in retrospect as all that Bowie had been and a little of what he would become, all jumbled up and fighting for control. Composition: still one of David Bowie's best-known songs, Space Oddity was a largely acoustic number augmented by the eerie tones of the composer's stylophone, a pocket electronic organ. The title and subject matter were inspired by Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey and introduced the character of Major Tom. Some commentators have also seen the song as a metaphor for heroin use, citing the opening countdown as analogous to the drug's passage down the needle prior to the euphoric hit, and noting Bowie's admission of a silly flirtation with Smack in 1968. His 1980 hit Ashes to Ashes declared "We know Major Tom's a junkie." Unwashed and somewhat slightly dazed reflected a strong Bob Dylan influence, with its harmonica, edgy guitar sound and snarling vocal. Letter to Herman was a farewell ballad to Bowie's former girlfriend, Herman Farthingale, who was also the object of an occasional dream, a gentle folk tune reminiscent of the singer's 1967 debut album. God Knows I'm Good, Bowie's observational tale of a shoplifter's plight, also recalled his earlier style. Signet Committee has been called Bowie's first true masterpiece. Commonly regarded as the album track most indicative of the composer's future direction, its lead character is a messianic figure, who breaks down barriers for his younger followers, but finds that he has only provided them with the means to reject and destroy him. Bowie himself described it at the time as a put-down of hippies who seemed ready to follow any charismatic leader. Another track cited as foreshadowing themes to which Bowie would return in the 1970s, in this case the fracturing of personality, was Janine, which featured the words, "But if you took an axe to me, you'd kill another man, not me at all." The Buddhism-influenced Wild-Eyed Boy from Free a Cloud was presented in a heavily expanded form compared to the original guitar and cello version on the B-side of the Space Oddity single. The album cut featured a 50-piece orchestra and was also notable for Mick Ronson's debut on a Bowie record, playing uncredited guitar and hand claps midway through the song. Memory of a Free Festival was Bowie's reminiscence of an arts festival he had organized in August 1969. Its drawn-out fade chorus was compared to the Beatles' Hey Jude. The song has also been interpreted as a derisive comment on the counterculture it was ostensibly celebrating. The background vocals for the crowd finale featured Bob Harris, his wife Sue, Tony Wolcott and Mark Bolan among other people. In 1970 Bowie cut the tune in half for the A and B sides of a more rock-oriented version featuring the band that would accompany him on The Man Who Sold the World later that year, Mick Ronson, Tony Visconti and Mick Woodmansey, an embryonic form of Ziggy Stardust's Spiders from Mars. Production and release, held to be the first Bowie album proper, and his first deemed worthy by record companies of regular reissue, David Bowie featured a notable list of collaborators, including session players Herbie Flowers, Tim Monick, Terry Cox, and Rick Wakeman, as well as cellist Paul Buckmaster, multi-instrumentalist and producer Tony Visconti, and bassist John Lodge. Before recording for the album commenced at Trident Studios, the song Space Oddity had been selected as the lead single based on an earlier demo. Tim Monick, John Honk Lodge, Mick Wayne and John Cambridge all from the band Junior's Eyes featured on the album's sessions and briefly served as Bowie's backing band for live appearances and on an October 1969 BBC radio session. Visconti saw it as a novelty record, and passed the production responsibility on to Gus Dudgeon. He thus produced all the songs on the album bar what would become, from its 1972 reissue onwards, the title track. Although the opening song had given Bowie a number 5 hit in the UK earlier in the year, the remainder of the material bore little resemblance to it and the album was a commercial failure on its initial release, despite some decent reviews. However, the November 1972 reissue, released in the wake of Bowie's breakthrough The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars and featuring a contemporary Ziggy photo on the cover, made number 17 in the UK charts and number 16 in the United States. Cover art. The original UK David Bowie LP cover artwork showed a facial portrait of Bowie exposed on top of a work by artist Victor Vasselli with blue and violet spots on a green background. The same portrait was used on the US Mercury LP Man of Words Man of Music, but on a plain blue background. When the album was re-released as Space Oddity in 1972 by RCA, a more recent portrait from the Ziggy Stardust period was displayed on the front cover. For the 1999 CD reissue, the original UK cover was restored, although the new title was added under the portrait to avoid further confusion. The 2009 40th anniversary edition also uses the original UK cover, but reverts to the original green tint and David Bowie title. Track listing. All songs written and composed by David Bowie. Release history. 7 inches open reel tape releases. There was only one release of Space Oddity on open reel, in 1972, duplicated by Magdk, North Hollywood, California, 91605. This is a high-speed 7.5 IPS release. RCA is the only known company Bowie has been assigned to that released his albums in this format, and only in the US, though imports into other regions may have occurred. CD releases. Space Oddity was first released on CD by RCA in 1984. In keeping with the 1972 RCA LP release, Don't Sit Down remained missing. The German and Japanese masters were sourced from different tapes and are not identical for each region. In 1990, the album was reissued by Recordisc with an expanded track listing including a restored Don't Sit Down as well as Conversation Piece, and the two-part re-recording of Memory of a Free Festival that had been released as a single in 1970. 1990 bonus tracks, Conversation Piece, 1970 Euro 305, Memory of a Free Festival Part 1, 1970 Euro 359, Memory of a Free Festival Part 2, 1970 Euro 331, 1999 Remaster. The album was reissued again in 1999 by EMI Virgin, without bonus tracks but with 24-bit digitally remastered sound and retaining the original Don't Sit Down. The Japanese mini LP replicates the cover of the original Philips LP, 2009 Special Edition. In 2009, the album was released as a 2-CD Special Edition by EMI Virgin as David Bowie with the original cover art, with the first disc containing the original 9 tracks and the second disc a collection of unreleased demos, stereo versions and previously released B-sides and BBC session tracks. 2009 bonus disc, all songs written by David Bowie, unless otherwise indicated. Space Oddity Euro 510 different from the demo released on Sound Plus Vision, 2003, An Occasional Dreamer Euro 249, Wild-Eyed Boy from Freer Cloud Euro 456 previously released on Sound Plus Vision, 2003, Brian Matthew interviews David / Let Me Sleep Beside You, 1969, a Euro 445 previously released on Boy at the Beeb, 2000, Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed a Euro 354, Janina Euro 302 previously released on Boy at the Beeb, 2000, London by Tor. Euro Tar Euro 312 previously released on Sound Plus Vision, 2003, The Prettiest Star Euro 312 previously released on the Best of David Bowie 1969/1974, 1997, Conversation Piece a Euro 306, Memory of a Free Festival a Euro 401 previously released on EMI Recordisc reissue of Space Oddity, 1990, Memory of a Free Festival a Euro 330 previously released on EMI Recordisc reissue of Space Oddity, 1990, Wild-Eyed Boy from Freer Cloud a Euro 445, Memory of a Free Festival a Euro 922, London by Tor Euro Tar Euro 234, Ragazzo Solo, Ragazza Sola, Ivan Mogul, a Euro 514, Personnel, David Bowie a Euro Vocals, 12-string guitar, acoustic guitar, stylophone, kalimba, Rick Wakeman a Euro Mellotron, electric harpsichord, keyboards, Terry Cox a Euro drums, Tim Manick a Euro electric guitar, Keith Christmas a Euro acoustic guitar, Mick Wayne a Euro guitar, Tony Visconti a Euro bass guitar, flute, recorder, Herbie Flowers a Euro bass guitar, Benny Marshall and Friends a Euro harmonica, Paul Buckmaster a Euro cello. Charts, album, single. Notes. External links, David Bowie at Discogs.